may this reading relax you and validate you. This is chapter 46, titled, The Puzzle is Not Complete. Or is it? February 28th, 2018. I landed in New Delhi the day before the annual International Yoga Festival was to begin in Rishikesh at our ashram. As director of the festival, I had to be there. It was going to be huge. I was on my way home from Vienna, where I'd attended a conference of faith-based organizations, quote, United Against Violence in the Name of Religion, unquote, organized by the King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz. If I can pronounce that better, you're welcome to let me know. International Center for Interreligious and Intercultural Dialogue, KAICIID, an intergovernmental organization that promotes interfaith dialogue to prevent and resolve conflict. The United Nations, Saudi Arabia, Spain, Austria, and other countries and religious institutions. I love that something like that exists. I think the world certainly deserves more of that kind of brotherhood, sisterhood. Amazingly, I had been in Vienna 2 weeks earlier as well to attend another conference, one devoted to the UN Plan of Action for religious leaders to prevent incitement to violence that could lead to atrocity crimes. Wow, that includes genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Very important also. For 2 years, I'd been engaged with the Plan of Action, attending and speaking at the conferences around the world, including the Plan of Action launch in July 2017 in New York with the UN Secretary General. This was one of the numerous UN programs, events, and campaigns that I'd been invited to participate in over the last many years on behalf of India, Hinduism, and our Global Interfaith WASH Alliance. Why me? I wondered to myself and my guru, Pujya Swamiji. See, he said, I told you that you would play a major role in touching and inspiring people around the world. This is only the beginning, he said. Sometimes I wonder if her guru had the foresight to know that people like us would be reading her book in a sangha like the one we are doing now. I love this work, the people at the organizations who are doing these projects, and the people in countries all around the world who will be touched by the impact of these efforts. Although 2 trips to Vienna in less than a month was not easy, it was worth it. These conferences were giving me a chance to have a part in something huge and impactful. And as a dear, dear friend and hero at the UN reminds me, your voice is unique and adds value. Our week-long International Yoga Festival, a major annual event we had hosted since 1999, would be starting early the next day. I showered at the Delhi airport, 600 rupees, about $8, for a clean bathroom with individually wrapped soap, shampoo, cotton, and Q-tips. Why cotton and Q-tips? Before heading to the domestic terminal to fly in Rishikesh. Does she answer the question, why cotton and Q-tips? Let's see. In Vienna, it had been minus 9 degrees Fahrenheit. I had watched people ice skating outside my hotel window. Here in Delhi, the heat beat down through the smog and was already sizzling the city. As soon as I arrived at the ashram, one of the men in seva, a Sanskrit word meaning selfless service, told me, Pujya Swamiji is waiting for you. There is a press conference. Come. Shortly, I was smack in the middle of a news conference with local, state, and national media. Swamiji and I answered questions about the festival from a few dozen media representatives with nearly as many cameras and mics in front of us. More than 1,000 people from 92 countries are registered, and we are sure it will grow as the week goes by, we said. In fact, 2,000 people from more than 100 countries ended up coming. Swamiji continued, the Vice President of India will inaugurate the festival on March 3rd. His Holiness the Dalai Lama is coming to bless us with his presence and inaugurate our Buddha garden and statue. He will stay with us on the 3rd and 4th of March. We have two of India's most renowned musicians, Shivamani and Kailash Kher, coming to perform. And more than 80 presenters from 20 countries, including some of India's most renowned religious leaders and experts of dozens of streams of yoga, from Iyengar and Ashtanga to Jivamukti and Sufi meditation. There will be 150 classes over 7 days, then an International Women's Day program on the 8th of March. The hours between the afternoon press conference and evening blurred in an unbroken flurry of meetings and conversations. The festival was run entirely by volunteers, devotees from around the world under the leadership of our resident Seva, selfless service team. Registration teams, catering teams, accommodation teams, scheduling teams, production teams, and media teams met throughout the afternoon, overlapping groups pouring into and out of my office. Anyone who has ever organized a mega festival knows what the day before the event looks like. And I am not one of those people, at least not yet. At the welcome gathering for presenters, I was able to stay awake only by sheer willpower and the joy of seeing so many people I consider friends. Afterward, I just wanted to go to sleep. I don't blame her. Eat a little something, my Guru Puja Swamiji said. For someone who left home at the age of 8 and has never lived anywhere except the jungle and this ashram, he has a remarkably instinctive grasp of motherhood. So I asked the guys to bring a cup of soup and some chapati to my desk. While I was eating, I decided to check pending emails. I sipped the soup and folded the chapati between bites to be able to eat it more quickly. I like that. Just like the trick to eat pizza, you fold it in half too. As I looked at my inbox to see if there was anything important, a new email arrived. The subject was Manny. My breath stopped. If you remember, Manny is the name of her biological father that legally disowned her. I should clarify. Someone else legally adopted her, and then that adoption process legally means that she was no longer the legal daughter of Manny. It was from my stepbrother, Tony, son of Ellen, the woman my biological father had married. Tony and I had loved each other in childhood, and when Manny reached out and re-established contact with me, seeing Tony again was an unequivocal bonus. After almost 10 years without contact, since our ill-fated meeting and my subsequent hospitalizations, Manny had flown to Detroit in the summer of 1999, where my Guru Puja Swamiji and I were giving spiritual lectures and programs as part of the annual Dharma Yatra, a pilgrimage of righteousness, is what that literally translates to, and had taken me out to dinner. Swamiji had sat with him for a few minutes before we went out. Yes, Swamiji opened space for Manny to speak, as though, obviously, there was something to be said. Manny had fidgeted and fumbled and cracked a few jokes, and had looked relieved when the meeting was over. Over dinner at a vegan restaurant he'd proudly found, Manny had begun as he'd begun 10 years earlier during my visit to Denver in spring of my freshman year at Stanford. But either the tone in his voice had changed, or the tone in my ears had. Now, even though he spoke words of empty explanation, your mother was too difficult, etc., I heard the repentance of a haunted man. This is someone who had abused her. "He's haunted," I said to my guru Swamiji after I got back from dinner. At Manny's request, I had gone to visit him and Ellen the following year. In May 2000, that is... one second. Sorry, I need to take a moment to pause there, to cough. I had gone to visit him and Ellen the following year in May 2000 at his large home in Franktown, Colorado. It was before he was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. Hope I pronounced that right, or at least before he told me about it. I was no longer looking for anything from him. Rather, I was looking for what I could give him. I hadn't really known him when I was a child. Not in any way I remember. Not in a way that I remember his personality, I should say. So I don't know if he had always been this haunted and nervous, or if this had been triggered by meeting me again. But I had felt his anxiety, the whirling of his thoughts, and the pumping of his heart. I wanted to offer some relief, but I didn't want to talk about our history, as he made his position clear. There would be no apology or repentance. He had said it twice, unequivocally, 10 years apart. I didn't need to hear it again. And there was nothing specific I felt a need to say to him then. The only unfinished business for me had been, could you at least say you're sorry? Could you at least acknowledge the damage done to me, who, despite decades of believing the opposite, with my head in a toilet, did not actually cause your behavior? Could you at least maybe acknowledge that? That conversation would have been my unfinished business, but it was palpably obvious that any conversation regarding what he had done wrong, any insinuation that he was not fully, completely justified in everything he did, was out of the question. But that night, I had been able to feel his repentance in his pulse, in the jittery way he pulled the pizza from the oven with great flair, sliced it with a professional wheel thing. I could feel it in the sound of his voice when he said, "And the no cheese vegan variety for you, extra veggies." I had stayed overnight that visit and found myself rising from bed in the night to lock the door of my room. At that moment, I had realized that, going forward, I would only make daytime visits. No need to put myself through this again. Over the next years, I had visited him a few times. I had forgiven him. I had done what I needed to do for myself, and, I thought, for him. But I couldn't pretend the first 25 years of my life hadn't happened. Forgiveness, as I emphasize in satsang, doesn't mean that what the other person did is okay. It isn't condoning the act. You're not pretending to marry the person who hurt you, or become their best friend, or play the role of loving daughter. It simply means setting yourself free. I was choosing to play the role of his daughter to feel better about myself as a person, helping assuage his guilt and alleviate his pain. I'm okay, I thought, even without your presence, your love, your care, or even your money. I've turned out fine, even without the apology or repentance you keep reminding me I'll never get. I'm still okay, and I still absolve you to the extent I'm able. The karmic fruit people get for the seeds they've sown does not depend on our forgiveness. I forgave Manny because I needed to be free. I forgave him because, as my Guru Pujya Swamiji reminded me that day in September 1996, no one else could draw that line for me. I had to do it. I forgave him because the only other option was to stay identified as a victim, ensconced in my drama. But I cannot uproot the tree he planted in his karmic garden. I had gotten back in contact as he requested. I had maintained the contact lovingly and unconditionally. My visits were not dependent on him apologizing. But I also had to honor myself. Loving kindness has to include ourselves. When we send loving kindness and compassion to all of creation, it has to go inward as well as outward. I extend my arms inward and embrace myself, not just my divine higher self, but also my individual impacted self who is doing her best. Compassion begins in the depth of my heart, the depth of my being, and includes all the parts of me, not just the most awake. Only when I can embrace myself in loving compassion will I be able to embrace the world. I am not just a bestower of compassion, I'm also a deserving recipient of compassion. To be there with Manny, pretending that those decades hadn't happened, would not have worked. I had to be there consciously, as that consciousness enabled me to know, to absolutely know beyond any vestigial doubt my intellect mind might still have had, that something magical had happened to me in India. Being there with him, laughing and eating pizza without rushing into the bathroom to throw up my pain and anger, was a miracle. But I did not need to continue putting myself in that situation just to prove what a beatific giver I was now that Mother Ganga had taken my pain. I was still very human and very much in need of self-compassion. So I had continued to visit, but only sporadically, stopping occasionally on layovers between flights. Once, Swamiji and I had dinner at Manny and Ellen's before they drove us to the airport for our flight. One year we met in the airport itself, as my layover was just a few hours. Tony, Ellen's son, and I reconnected with love. He joined us on one of our pilgrimages to Tibet and spent time at the ashram. He flew out to Los Angeles with his wife and son during one of my visits to get together. We emailed regularly. "Do you remember everything?" I had asked him one time as he drove me to the airport in Denver. "Yes, I think so," he had said. "How did you forgive?" I had spoken with him gently, not exactly sure of how much he remembered and not wanting to make things worse for him. I shared the ritual of giving my pain to the river goddess Ganga. I shared what I had learned about forgiveness, and I shared the freedom I had found in it. Manny's multiple myeloma. I keep wanting to say myelinoma, but it's not that. It's myeloma. Myeloma. Stayed in remission for 16 years. His diagnosis in 2002 had predicted a life expectancy of a few years, but he was a doctor and a smart man. He researched and researched, developed and developed, volunteered for new trial after new trial. When I saw him in 2015, he looked older and a bit weaker, but relatively healthy. I had stopped going through Denver for many years. Itineraries got busier and other things took over. I also noticed that until he got an email from me, I never heard from him. When I reached out, He was gracious, happy, and eager to see me, but unless I did, years went by without so much as a happy birthday. Finally, I thought to myself, reach out to him. He's in pain, and when he passes, you don't want to feel like you missed an opportunity. So, I emailed him in June 2015 after being out of touch for a few years. He came to see me while I was visiting LA that summer, making up a story about a medical convention he had to attend. I was touched by the lie. He couldn't bring himself to say, "I'm flying here to see you." But clearly, he wanted to see me and made up an excuse. We met for lunch between meetings of his quote-unquote medical conference. In 2017, he had driven up to Boulder, Colorado to see me for a few hours during a program Pujya Swamiji and I had there. Do I really have to do this? I asked Swamiji. I feel so done with him. It's just for a few hours, Swamiji had comforted me. He's sick, and he is the reason you're on this planet, remember? So we spent a couple of hours sitting in a sunlight den making small talk. Manny told me the details of the treatment he was undergoing, but he didn't say he was dying. At one point in the conversation he said, "I should stop talking about my life and ask about yours. I've been talking the whole time." I smiled and said I was happy to listen to him. No, you talk, he said. Tell me about your life. I told him about the work we were doing, about the new programs for water, sanitation, and hygiene. I told him about being at the United Nations. I told him about my menopausal hot flashes. He listened attentively, commented thoughtfully, and made jokes that I don't remember now. I laughed, not just to be polite, but because he was genuinely funny. After a few hours, he had to get back for treatment. We hugged goodbye, and he walked out. Tony's email a year later was short and simple. Manny had died the night before, on February 26th, 2018, in Denver. There would be no funeral. He wanted to be cremated. There would also be no memorial. He had not wanted one. I went and sat with Pujya Swamiji for a few minutes and cried. Tears of loss, tears of separation. But I was, surprisingly, okay. I felt really done. Although I never got the apology I'd yearned for, his demeanor had felt like one. He was clearly haunted by guilt. Who opens conversations with, "If you're looking for apologies or repentance, you're looking in the wrong place"? I was at peace with my relationship with Manny because I was at peace with myself. That inextinguishable peace lasted a matter of weeks. At the end of March, I received an email from his wife, Ellen, with a letter she said Manny had left for me. It took some maneuvering to download the attachment. My operating system didn't recognize it. She told me Manny had written it before he died and asked her to send it to me. Oh, 1 second. Thank you for your patience as I attend to the call of nature. The letter was dated October 2010. It was 4.5 single-space typed pages explaining why he was not leaving me anything in his will, how first my mother, then Frank, and then I had hurt him, insulted him. With each page, my eyes got drier and drier from staring without blinking. What was he talking about? Who was he writing to? What history was he describing? He had taken the chronology of our life, the chronology of my life, and rewritten it. He was hurt that once I was out of my mother's house and in college, I hadn't bothered to contact him. What? We had corresponded regularly from the first week I arrived at Stanford until I traveled to Colorado to visit him during my spring break. That was when he had announced I should not expect any apologies or repentance. A week later, I was in the hospital, vomiting blood and with a blood pressure of 80/40. He had known about the hospitalizations. He had known I was out of school. My doctors had written to him. I had spoken to him on the phone from a line of payphones in my second hospital, the summer between my first and second years at Stanford, 5 months after we'd been together in Denver. Manny's only concern had been that because, at that point, I wasn't registered as a full-time student, because I'd broken the stipulation in the divorce agreement to remain continuously enrolled, because I was in a hospital instead of in school, he was absolved from his financial responsibility. What did he mean I hadn't contacted him? He was insulted that I hadn't told him about my wedding. 3 years after, he paid an agreed-on lump sum to cover the rest of my college education and then made me sign a document that I had no right to expect anything more from him. After not reaching out to ask how I was after the hospitalizations, to find out if I was even alive, and he was insulted not to be invited to my wedding, my heart was pounding so strongly, it felt like a huge mallet striking a heavy gong in my chest. I was suffocating and choking. What was he talking about? I asked my empty office. He claimed he had tried to contact me during those 10 years between the age of 8 and 18, but that my mother had intercepted the mail. In those years, my mother had worked full-time. I had brought in the mail every day, and my mother's not a liar. I was certain of that. There was no way she would have watched me sob and pine for my father while withholding his letters or efforts at communication. I know her too deeply to believe that. Also, Manny had told me numerous times that he'd been, quote, unable to reach out to me, unquote, during those years of my childhood, and now suddenly he's claiming that he had reached out. How dare he rewrite history, especially after he was dead. He also shared how he'd been abused by his own father and how painful that had been for him. He did not acknowledge that he carried that imprint into his own fathering, how the cycle of abuse continued from him to me. Also, this letter was dated 2010. I'd seen him at least twice since then, and both times he had gone out of his way to see me, once in Los Angeles, once in Boulder, and both times the meetings had been sweet, never very deep, as per his explicit and implicit instructions, but sweet, soft, and what felt to me complete. He had been sorry. I could feel it even if he wouldn't say it. I had forgiven him. I had told him that explicitly, as gently and lovingly as I could, and I had hoped my actions and my nonverbal, energetic communication had showed him that. No. We were not going to rewind history and start over now that I was in my 40s. I have a dad, Frank, from whom love comes unencumbered by fear, anger, or hate. A dad I know will always, in any and every way, be there for me and with me, not dependent on my sending the first email. I didn't need another dad in my middle age, but it had seemed to me that Manny and I were both at peace with what our relationship had come to include: connection, understanding, forgiveness, and even love. If he was that hurt, angry, and insulted, why hadn't he told me during the 8 years between writing that letter and dying? Why had he sat across the table from me for I was adding that number from the last sentence. Why had he sat across the table from me for hours, talking about everything except his feelings? And why had he not seemed angry at all, hurt or insulted? He had seemed anxious. He had seemed guilty. He had seemed haunted, restless, and awkward. But he had never at any point seemed angry or hurt. Why had he waited until he was dead to give the letter to me, ensuring that we would never have a conversation to discuss any of this? The letter is your stepmother's way of making sure you don't try to get any money, a close friend told me. It's not even signed, just a computer document that she sent you a month after his death. Oh God, I thought. Did she not realize that I'd signed off all rights at the age of 19, that I'd been legally adopted by Frank and so wasn't even legally Manny's daughter anymore? Did she not realize that there was no way I would ever imagine trying to fight for Manny's money? I'd let go of trying to get anything from him decades ago. I will never know who wrote the letter, when it was written, or any of the other mysteries surrounding it. There are places even Hercule Poirot, which is Hercule Poirot, a French name that I'm sure I'm butchering, and Sherlock Holmes can't go. There are depths in the heart and mind of people that don't follow the laws of nature and can't be figured out. There are jigsaw puzzles that remain unfinished, with pieces missing forever. I could re-enter the world of who did what to whom and when. I could use my intelligence, not the spiritual intelligence discovered in India, but the Stanford-groomed academic intelligence, to scour the pathways of my past to find some of the missing pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. Or I could look at the puzzle with its empty pieces and make room within me for the reality that it's unfinished and always will be. I can open those empty places to the grace of Ganga and let her wash through them and in them, filling them not with answers, facts, or reasons, but with a stillness and a presence of being in which questions don't need answers and mysteries don't need to be solved, a place that just is. The time after I received the letter purportedly from Manny has been a time of sitting with a fullness that includes the holes, a fullness that doesn't require answers. In this fullness, emptiness blossoms. On Ganga Dussehra, the festival celebrating the day that Mother Goddess Ganga descended to earth from heaven, on that day, 18 years earlier, I was bathed in my sannyas, renunciation, initiation ceremony, and became Sadhvi Bhagawati. On that day, Pujya Swami, Guru Sharananandaji, and the Pujya Swamiji's hands channeled light and energy into my brain, into every cell of my body, and into the depths of my non-physical being. And on that day in 2018, I burned Manny's letter in the sacred yajna, sacrificial fire with ghee, clarified butter, and camphor as purification, and with the traditional mix of sesame seeds and rice as offering. The seeds represent our ego. O God, take my false ego self, free me from identifying with this story, fill me not with answers, facts, reasons, or details, but with the fullness of your grace, and bring Manny peace wherever he is. He has suffered enough. Mother Goddess, as you have washed over me, wash over him wherever he is and in whatever form he may now be. Bathe him with your healing grace. Free him from the cycle of suffering. O God, help me continue to grow and expand into these empty spaces. Help the love in my heart flow through the parts of my life that are interwoven with His. Help me feel how okay it all is. I may not be ready to see the absolute perfection in it, but for now, help me see the fullness and okayness. After the yajna, the sacrifice, I bathed in Ganga. O Mother Goddess, purify these karmic bonds, the chains that hold us each together, the chains that hold us to our identification and this relationship. O Mother Goddess Ganga, liberate me and bring me ultimate peace. We're almost on the chapter. And hello to everyone who has joined while we've been reading live. From the moment Pujya Swamiji told me all he wanted from me was to get closer to God, serve humanity, and be happy, I have found they are not three things, but one. It is through service I feel closest to God, and through being closest to God that I am happiest. Hanuman, the monkey god revered for his bhakti, loving devotion, is what we call in India my Ishta Devata, my personal deity, the form of the divine closest to my heart. Hanuman embodies the miracle of love. He embodies miraculous power and strength, the ability to accomplish the impossible, the essence of surrender to the word and the will of his beloved Lord Rama, another form of the divine. And at the core of it all is his love for Rama. Love, I have found, is that divine power at the core of all possibility. It's what compels me to serve, and it's the fruit of service. On days I feel frustrated or overburdened by work, I turn inward and ask, where is the love? What has made it dry up? What distraction or inner pattern has pulled me out of love and made service feel like a burden? Pujya Swamiji, my Guru's pronouncement that I would touch many has turned out to be true. It seems he knew, as he beheld the lump of clay of the 25-year-old me, what he would shape the clay into. Or perhaps, like a meteorologist, he was able to forecast the weather and direction of my life force going forward. However he knew, I've had the opportunity to be of service to many. The Seva has expanded as he also anticipated, branching into creation of the Divine Shakti Foundation, which provides education, vocational skill training, and empowerment for women, girls, and school children, and our global interfaith WASH Alliance, the world's first major association of interfaith religious leaders for water, sanitation, and hygiene. The Seva, selfless service, has expanded into many other significant programs at Paramarth Niketan as well, including our International Yoga Festival, which has begun uniting people from all across the globe for more than 20 years. Through no merit of my own, my cup runneth over with love and an eagerness to share, and I've served as President, Secretary General, and other positions of authority for all these organizations and programs. 25 years later, I have not been dulled in astonishment with which I behold each day, when I find myself walking into the United Nations and speaking to or with world leaders about women's empowerment, gender equality, and the human right to water, sanitation, and hygiene. I chuckle a bit inside and whisper to God, "So funny you are. Me? Really? Here? It's at moments like these that I return to Hanuman and remember, it's not about me. It's not about this event, function, project, or partnership. It's about you. These are all ways for you to flow into and through me, allowing me to express my love for you. My favorite is satsang, the spiritual lectures, both with and without questions and answers. When I close my eyes, whether there are 10 or 10,000 people in the room, and simply get out of the way, remembering that it's not me. It happens. I rest in the awareness that I don't have the wisdom or know the answer. And if I can just get out of the way and create internal space, free from any sense of strengths or shortcomings, grace flows as wisdom, as truth, and as offerings of service to those in need. Through the many aspects of service, I've been blessed to experience myself in others, in those sitting before me in satsang, in the children, the girls, and the women in our free schools and training centers, in the supervisors. Well, I'm sure that's true, but actually she had written, in the survivors of natural disasters we've been blessed to provide with, new home, schools, and more. Recommitting myself each day to the promises I made to Pujya Swamiji, I find both God and my own self in the eyes of those we serve. Thank you for listening. That is the end of the 46th chapter, which has touched on many things, from forgiving someone whom never apologized, to missing pieces of the puzzle which we might never receive, to finding grace in service. I'm grateful for this reading today. I know it has been a longer one, but a very great start to our Sangha today. Thank you.